Hello YouTube, it's Zach. It's been a while and a lot has happened within the past few months. I suppose that applying for asylum has been the cause for a lot of stress for me, and so I wasn't able to focus on my activism as much. Hopefully now that I'm in a more stable situation, I'm gonna be able to focus on it a lot more. Throughout the whole process, I think everything would have been much easier had I known exactly what I was going to go through. And so for this reason, for people who might want to apply for asylum in the future, and for people who are just curious about this, people who want to know more about the experiences of refugees, I thought it would be useful to make a video explaining everything that I've gone through. So I'm going to be explaining what asylum is, what the process involves, and what my experiences with it have been. So what is a refugee? What is the right to asylum? Who has it? Who doesn't? And when should someone apply for it? A refugee, according to the United Nations and the Basic Law of Germany, is a person who has to flee their country on grounds of persecution on regards of their race, religion, nationality, sex, or membership to a particular social or political group. The right to asylum is granted when the host country's judicial system determines that the applicant has justified fear of persecution upon returning. For example, if an applicant is determined to be gay and their country of origin is determined to be an unsafe environment for them or a place where gay people are persecuted, then in theory that should be considered grounds for asylum. Unfortunately, though, this system is not perfect. A lot of the time, people with perfectly legitimate asylum claims are rejected. One particularly egregious case of that was that of an Iranian Christian convert. The reason for his rejection was that he didn't know enough about the violence in the Bible. Basically, he didn't know enough about the Bible, and so they didn't believe he was a Christian. I've also personally known Christian and atheist Saudis who have been denied asylum for similarly absurd reasons here in Germany. The terrifying thing here is that nobody, no matter how solid their case is, has any guarantee of success upon their initial application. The other side of that, of course, being that there are a lot of fraudulent asylum applicants that do end up being granted asylum. And so the difficulty here is knowing who's lying and who's telling the truth. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, this really important decision is left to chance, which really shouldn't happen. Suffice it to say that it's a long and difficult process, and anybody who's thinking about applying for it needs to make sure first that they really don't have any other options. By January of 2019, I had come to accept that it's not safe for me and probably will never be safe for me to go back to Saudi Arabia. As an identifiable ex-Muslim and as a public critic of the regime, all it took was for the wrong person to see the wrong social media post, or for the wrong person to see the wrong text message, and there's a real risk of being put in prison for a very long time, or at the very least having a travel ban thrown on me. That way my life would be over and I would have to say goodbye to the possibility of freedom. I'd gotten used to being afraid. Here I was protected, here I was free and I was safe. That was something I had to fight for. As my legal residency in Germany was coming to an end, I knew what I had to do. I went to the immigration authority in Berlin and I told them I wanted to make an application for asylum. They had me give them all of my identifying documents and fill out a few forms and told me to come back another day. Now, my legal residency in Germany was not yet over and I had my reasons to stay in Berlin. So when I went back to them in April, they gave me a train ticket to a city called Halberstadt in the Sachsen-Anhalt state of Germany. I think the mistake I made here was lagging the process this long, because it's always better to be ahead in your paperwork. So my advice here would be just to listen to what they say and go wherever they tell you to go. Transfers are not optional. Once they decide they want you to be in a place, then your asylum process will only be there. On the 9th of April 2019, I arrived to Halberstadt on a train. I went to the camp and they housed me in a room with one other person. Typically rooms that are housed between 2 and 5 people. They're fairly large but also run down and kind of vandalized. Internet is not provided, the food is really bad, but you're provided basic medical care. I know, what are you gonna expect in a refugee camp? Within the first few days of being in camp, I received an invitation to my first hearing. It was only a few days away, so I had to scatter to gather all of my evidence. But ultimately it didn't help me because this hearing was only about the most basic information, like my name, where I come from, who my parents are, my economic status, how I came to Germany, all of that, but nothing about the asylum claim. My hearing lasted just under an hour, and from there I had to prepare for my second hearing. Before my hearing, I had to make sure that I was ready to adequately explain what my situation was and why I needed asylum. This hearing, after all, can make the difference between life and death. And so, what I did and what I recommend everyone else does is to print anything relevant to the case and who you are and why you're being persecuted. So, for example, news articles, pictures, text messages, social media posts, police records, government documents, all of that. Don't leave anything out. Another step that might help some people is to consult with a lawyer beforehand. That costs generally around 150 euros. It's not that expensive, and I think they might be able to give you some important insight. Now, I didn't do that for personal reasons, but I guess everything worked out fine in the end for me. But it might be a deciding factor for someone else, so who knows? For people who don't speak German or the official language of the country where they're applying for asylum, it's important to make sure that no major translation errors are made that could have an impact on your case. In Germany, you have the right to a bystander, a person who might speak German, to listen to everything. And if the translator seems incompetent or something, you generally have the right to change them. In the end of the interview, there's going to be a translated revision. So if you see something wrong, then make sure to point that out. What's also important in this interview is that you're prepared to be argumentative. So if you're gay, try to find a way to prove it. If you're an ex-Muslim, try to find a way to prove that as well. Prepare to argue for your position adequately. If you're a Christian convert, then you should probably know something about the Bible. Make sure that they don't have an excuse to reject you, because right there in that room, they're not on your side. My interview lasted more than 4 straight hours, where I had to explain exactly why I didn't believe in God, why I left Islam, what my problems with Islam are. And my interviewer even made a point to insist that I was only against political Islam and that everything that I'm against in Islam, such as misogyny and theocratic law, were just a result of political Islam. I had to explain, of course, that political Islam is a direct result of Islam. It's a really weird experience to have to prove that I'm an atheist, because for a large part of my life, I had to convince people that I'm not an atheist just to secure my safety. So this time it's exactly the opposite, and I guess I made a pretty good case for myself. So if you're gonna do this, be prepared, get enough sleep, and be ready to argue. On the 13th of June 2019, I received the court's decision by post. My right to asylum has been granted. In this moment, I felt as if almost all of my fears were melting away. I've secured my safety and I've secured my freedom. I also consider myself incredibly fortunate to have only waited 3 months when the average in Germany is 8. And considering the number of perfectly legitimate asylum cases that get thrown out. If your asylum case is rejected, you're going to receive the decision by post as well, and you're going to be given 2 weeks to appeal the decision. After that, the deportation order is made. If you do appeal the decision, then you can't be deported until after the appeal process is done. If your claim, however, is considered to be clearly groundless, I don't know if that's the correct translation of the German status, like that guy I met in camp who told them in his interview that he doesn't want asylum, he just wants to rest for a few days in the camp. During the appeal process, if you've been in the initial reception facility for over 6 months, then you're going to be transferred to a home. There you're going to be in a more decent living situation, you might have the right to work and study, and from what I can tell, lead a relatively normal life. If you do have a perfectly legitimate case for asylum and you were rejected, I suggest you contact an organization that could help you. For atheists here in Germany, there is Atheist Refugee Relief. Otherwise, general human rights organizations that might help with this, Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch. The Dublin regulation is an EU-wide regulation that serves to make sure that asylum seekers don't seek asylum in multiple countries at the same time. What that means is that if someone applied for asylum in one EU country, say Spain, and then they applied for asylum again in another EU country like Germany, then they're going to have to be sent back to Spain. Those fingerprint records in the Eurodac don't only apply for asylum applications. They also apply for Schengen visas, national visas, and other procedures. There are exceptions to this rule, like for family reunification reasons, or if the applicant has not showed up for a long enough time, and different countries can apply differently in some instances. So if you have fingerprints for any reason in multiple EU countries, then you should probably contact a lawyer. Well, that's all I've got on this topic. I hope you guys find my experience to be informative and useful, and I hope people in the future might be able to avoid my mistakes and go through this process much easier. If you like my content, then please subscribe, share my videos, and leave some feedback. And until next time, bye.